so much, Sadie. And I'm just so grateful for the space for us to be able to talk about things that we know that so many of us are facing, but it's really difficult to talk about. And so I want to start really by celebrating and acknowledging these panel members who have bravely chosen to be honest and authentic about their journeys and their challenges and what it really looks like, the path to resiliency really looks like. So please join me in celebrating them before we even start, because it takes courage to be here. Thank you. Yeah, and it's been so fun to get to know each one of your stories, and I'm just hoping that they'll be as connected and touched as I have been by getting to know each of you. So when we think about mental resilience, really mental resiliency is the ability to adapt to challenges and stressors that you're experiencing in your everyday life. And that's like mental adaptivity, emotional, and oftentimes behavioral adaptivity. So I feel like we can't start by talking about resilience without talking about why we need to be resilient. There's a reality of that there are things, challenges, things that we're facing that we're trying to overcome that build resilience, but also challenge some of that. So one of the things like Harvard Business Review was saying that 50% of CEOs experience loneliness, and over 80% of founders are experiencing stress that they are hiding from their co-founders, from people in their lives. They're trying to keep that isolated and separate. And so we do know that people are experiencing some measure of stress in their founding journey, but also that it can be a little bit of a lonely journey in that. And so I would love for each of you to kind of give a little bit of voice to what that experience has been for you. And maybe Josh, if you want to start.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm looking right at Cody. Maybe that's very intentional, but my last conversation yesterday was with Cody. And I asked, how real do you want me to be? And to her credit, as real as you can be, which I greatly respect. So, Cody, I'm giving you as real as I can be. Would it surprise any of you to think that as I sit here today, I can absolutely say I am the most stressed I've ever been, the most isolated I've ever been, and probably the loneliest I've ever been in my life without question, right? I'm not one to focus on those aspects. What I'm focused on is how you handle that, right? And I can say that if the question's asked, why do I feel that way? Who can relate to what I'm doing, right? If I saw Jake in the crowd, I would point to perhaps Jake, but Jake doesn't need that burden. Last year, through TechSpark and Grand Farm, was able to have an informal program that called the Geographically Disadvantaged Founders Exchange. And Microsoft was kind enough to make connections in the Seattle area that I spent between a week to 2 weeks, January through May doing. And that was fantastic. Absolute strangers, but people that could relate to me as a founder and that I could relate to as well. And so when we think about what we can do to solve that, we can continue to grow as a community, because the more founders that go through that experience, I think the better off all of us will be.
Absolutely, absolutely. Clint, Michelle, maybe some comments about your experience in that with stress, maybe some isolation.
I would say it's absolutely no regrets, for sure. And I think I'm at that point now in my life where I've realized how valuable the founder entrepreneur experience really is. Thanks. That stress that you go through, the challenges you go through, and the loneliness, like you both have mentioned, is it's disturbing, When you get in that place. I've never been on the investor side. I've been on the founder side only. And I agree with Josh. It's about how you react to it, right? And when it's happening, when you're in it, when you're in the water. That's very important. The problem is there's not many people around you when you're going through your founder's journey to help you point out things. Okay, this is happening. Maybe you should try thinking about this a little bit. Maybe you should talk to so-and-so about this, Lots of people to talk to for financial opportunities and those kinds of things. Not a lot of people to talk to about your mental health. And like I said, I have no regrets. I'm very happy with the struggles I went through at this point. But there were these things that came up for me that I had no idea were there, mainly related to addictions and just problematic behavior that I found myself in. It just sneaks up on you, you know? Those are our coping mechanisms that we all find. They're very effective pacifiers, if you want to call them. And yeah, things like that just really took me by surprise and put me in places where I didn't realize I could be. So without getting into too many details, I'll stop with that, but yeah.
Well, first, I just want to give Josh a hug. Anyone with me on that? Yeah. Sincerely. And second, I want to thank Emerging Prairie and the organizers because I don't think I knew I was lonely until yesterday when I got to spend the evening with all of you and speaking with you individually, speaking with you as a group, and hearing over and over and over again the struggles and how similar they are, and just being in the presence of a group of people that can uniquely understand each other the way that we do. So thank you, Emerging Prairie.
Thank you. Yes. Such an important to consider. And thank you guys so much for sharing that. Absolutely. And I think, oftentimes in the founder's struggle, the hero's journey of climbing the mountain to success and trying to find a way to survive, that we feel we kind of need to be invincible in that process. Sometimes I think there's this tension coming into a space like this, because while part of us are longing for that deep authenticity of just being seen in the struggle of our journey, and still also feeling the tension of feeling like I need to present myself in a way that says I have it all together, because these connections, these relationships, I don't want there to be any perception of a possibility of failure. I only want to project confidence and a success mindset and all of those things. So there's this tension, internal tension too, where it's like part of us is longing for the real and yet also feeling this tension of having to be everything and be limitless. And Michelle and I, when we were talking, sometimes we are faced with our own limits. The reality is we are all limited in some capacity. We might have great capacity, and yet we will all be faced with the reality that we have limitations. So Michelle, can you talk a little bit about what that journey to realizing those limitations were for you?
I sure hope so. The reason that I'm here on the stage today is because several weeks ago I was speaking on a panel with women founders. And I was asked the question, how do you balance, the mental demands of being a founder? How do you take care of yourself? And I accidentally told the truth. And Sadie Schaefer, who's sitting right over here, our host today, heard it and asked me if I would come here today to talk about something that I've never said out loud to anyone except my close family. So here we go. So like all of you, and I mean that because I know that we're here today because we're wired a lot the same. I grew up competitive and ambitious and hard-charging and hardworking and maybe even a little bit defiant. If you told me I couldn't do it, I wanted to do it even more. If you told me not to pick my nose, I would look you in the eye and pick my nose and eat it, just for good measure. I brought these traits into adulthood, and I loved the race. And I've been professionally and personally rewarded for the way I approach living. And obnoxiously, I'll share just a few things. I was a vice president of a publicly traded multi-billion-dollar company when I was 27. I went to law school with 2 kids under the age of 2, and I had a baby each year of law school. 1 biological, 2 foster kids. From there, I was the first female named executive officer of another public company. I am now a founder. I prided myself on being powered by sugar and caffeine, and sleep was for other people. And self-care was the same as shame. And exactly 3 years ago next week, I started to lose feeling in my left leg, and then my arm, and weeks passed, and I went to doctors and rheumatologists and neurosurgeons, and for many weeks and months, I didn't know if I had ALS or MS. It spread to my neck and then my tongue, and I got to Mayo, and I'm so thankful for the world-class healthcare that's just 7 hours from here. But I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. I can smile about it now because, well, I'll explain that in a moment. But it's an autoimmune disease caused by chronic stress. I was living in a state of constant fight or flight, which I found exhilarating until I didn't. And I basically fried my central nervous system. And that's a thing. It's a real thing. And had you told me, like I'm sharing with you today, that there's a different way to tackle life, I wouldn't have listened or believed you. But I wanted to talk about this today, not to tell you to slow down and not to tell you to work less hard, because I know you, because I know me, and you won't. But you might be able to tackle things a little differently. After the diagnosis, I got to basically reinvent my life. I had to kind of rewire my brain, re-examine my own identity and what I valued about myself. I got to leave relationships that weren't healthy in my life. And I can sit here today, and the end of the story is very happy, and it's that it's a completely manageable condition, and I'm in the best shape of my life. And I think you should feel my bicep, Josh. It's pretty, yeah. So, yeah. So, I'm the cautionary tale on the stage, and I share it with you because you are my brothers and sisters in this journey, and I want you to think about your relationship with your body, and do believe me that you are not invincible and you do have limits. But again, the takeaway isn't slow down. I know you won't. Just to think about your life a little differently, and if you want some hints along the road, I'll be around later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your story and for your vulnerability in that. I think you're absolutely right. Like, it's hard sometimes to recognize that we are limited, and that, you know, when we're in this journey, there is like a sense of self-protection. There's like a little bit of this hypervigilance of this fight, flight, and freeze experience, because it feels a little bit like life or death sometimes when you're in the dogged pursuit of your passion and your dream. And you mentioned elements of identity, like the way that we see our like whole self-concept, that sometimes downshifting, even if it's mindful moments, right? Shifting into that like rest and digest space where our nervous system is not constantly being stressed and fired. It's finding those rhythms in our lives. Not, like I said, doesn't mean like you've chosen this path, at least partly because there's something that's drawing you towards that, and that might be personality characteristics, passion, wiring. So it doesn't mean you're going to do it differently or not do it at all, but do it in a way that is sustainable, really. So, you know, on that fact, all of you have been kind of in this exploration space of trying to figure out like what resiliency looks like to you. Like, what are the rhythms that help you to make those shifts, even in small ways, that help you to endure the stress and be able to handle and manage some of the additional constant pressure that you're experiencing as a founder as you're walking through. So we'd love to hear some of those practices, those things that you have found that have been helping you or that you've been exploring that are helping you maybe make that shift. Clint?
You want to start with me on that, huh? Yeah. So I don't want to go too far into a deep, long, drawn-out story, but I found myself at one point where I was especially alcohol. I was very attached to alcohol. I couldn't imagine doing anything without it, right? It was my escape. It was my pacifier. It was my, it's just everything in life I knew revolved around it. Some of that came from my family culture, societal rules, various things. But as I got into this founder role and started feeling those stresses that we were talking about, I turned to that as my main release, my main relief, and snuck up on me, and before I knew it, I was really focused on this one thing that I really wanted to make happen, but all the other things around me were kind of shaking and falling apart, you know? And I don't want to make it sound like it's that substance. It's what was driving me to that substance. That was the issue, right? Because I just never really took time to look at what was happening, how I was behaving, what was driving those behaviors, why I wasn't taking care of myself physically and mentally. A lot of those things. And I just didn't have, I found the right people eventually, but those people aren't usually the people that I interface with regularly, you know? I had to seek them out. And I would say probably the biggest thing for me that I found was meditation and psychedelics. They just gave me a really firm kick in the ass. Seriously. Made me really wake up and realize what is really going on around me. Wow, I've never paid attention to this before. I've been so focused on this money chasing, making my banana pile bigger. That's all I cared about, you know, achieve, right? Success. How big is your team now? You know, those questions would fuel it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. We all say those things to each other. We're friends. But yeah, that's what happened to me. It snuck up on me. And there was other things too. I don't want to make it sound like that was everything. That was the whole problem for me. It wasn't. And it was a gift, really, when it comes down to it. And I didn't just take the bow off the box and say, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. I lifted the lid off. I looked inside. I found some tools that helped me pull those things out and really examine them, really understand myself. I didn't understand myself before. I didn't know who the hell I was. I was just this machine, you know? So, yeah, did I kind of go in where you wanted me to go with that?
Yeah, you know, I had a dear friend that I kind of like co-led an organization with for a number of years, and when he would get burnt out, he would call it his dark tequila night. And he's like, I would go in a dark space alone with a bottle of tequila, and then I would reemerge the next day and do it all over again. And so sometimes when we think about how we're coping with the level of stress and what we're dealing with, sometimes we go to things that we know are not helpful, but they get us through, right? And then sometimes it takes practice, right? Some self-discovery, a willingness maybe to look inside. Even though sometimes when we're just trying to survive, like we're almost kind of scared to like take a look in and be like, because like, what if I find something that's not working out very well? You know, the research says that 72% of founders are struggling with mental health, and 77% of those people that are struggling will not seek professional help. But I think part of that is a little bit the survival mode where it's like, I'm a little scared actually to look under the hood there because like, I don't know that I have time to deal with that. Like, I don't want to deal with that right now. Like, I don't know if I can. And in some ways, it comes out other ways when we don't. And so finding those rhythms, Michelle has shared some other rhythms of things that she does as part of her routine that has, I think, been part of your adjustment. I would love for you to just share some of those with the room because I think that they're wonderful.
Well, you know, I don't want to leave the stage with all of you thinking that I don't work hard. I do work hard, and I just work differently. But I've also mixed in some other things that allow me to do that in a more focused way. And I do get up at 5 in the morning, and I go to the gym every day, and I go home, I journal, I read the Bible, and then I read some filthy novel. And it's 5-page or 5-minute rule. So the whole thing takes, maybe 15 minutes. I've enjoyed the journey to physical health so much that I actually started teaching a Pilates class. So it's downtown Fargo, Fly Fitness. Join me on Wednesday mornings or Thursday afternoon. And again, I go back to when I'll say, maybe the law school years, and people would say, you really need to take care of yourself or whatever. And I would almost be resentful. I'm not sure I can explain that feeling, but I don't want you to experience that now. I hope that you can hear this message as a way to think about things differently, not to do less. So those are things that work for me. They make my life rich, and they make me better at what I do for my job.
Thank you, absolutely. And I feel like, there's someone that I work with that when they're overwhelmed, they do 5 minutes of silence. They just shut their door, 5 minutes of silence. And so you could probably find 5 minutes to be able to reset your nervous system. So it can be small things. It doesn't have to be like, giving up your identity as a founder and the work. Because, that was one of the things that Josh and I were talking about, I think, earlier, too, is just like the pressure is real. You try to take one day off, and everything blew up, and you hadn't taken a day off in years, right? And so that is the tension of some of those things. So I know that we're a little out of time, but I do want to just ask one closing question for each of you. I think, part of sometimes what can feel like the isolating journey is that we feel a sense of individuality of having to do things alone. I have to build my own resilience. I have to build my own community. And there's such a thing as social resilience. And I think, that so much of even today is about building community around one another, building those connections with each other so we're not journeying alone. And I think each of you have talked about and expressed as part of your resilient journey the importance of community. But I'm just curious, when you think about the role of community, if there was something you wanted to say to this room about that responsibility, about recognizing that this is the container and the culture in which we rise and fall, what would you encourage either the founders or the investors or this community in general so that we can be more resilient together?
This is specific to venture capital, the journey that I'm learning. The Olympics are fresh in my mind. They recently completed. So if we think about our community supporting an Olympic athlete, well, first, there are very few Olympians. Second, going to the Olympics means you're going to the most competitive stage literally in the world. And I don't think we send Olympians away with the expectation that if you don't win a medal, that you've failed, right? That's unfathomable. But when we think about venture capital and you look at the statistics, we are sending those people on a journey that most fail, right? Arguably, you could say 75 to 90+% fail. We could also not imagine sending an Olympic athlete to compete somehow impaired, right? Holding them back. And yet, if we expect to play on a national stage or an international stage as venture-backed companies and the founders of those companies, we have to have our mindset evolve to the areas such as Silicon Valley, New York, Seattle, that are known for those companies. And we have to change that in such that companies that are going on a difficult journey, you have to understand the difficulty and realize that failure measured by a successful exit or not is really not what we should focus on. Everyone wants to succeed, me as much as anyone. But if you spend time in those environments, they celebrate success in an entirely different way. And the way they celebrate success is you are making a deposit into an ecosystem. If you exit, great. If you don't exit, you've left expertise or you've accomplished so much of an idea. There is added layer of foundation to build upon. So what I see for this ecosystem and its evolution as it relates to venture-backed companies is we have to be evolved to not be afraid of failure, not to have existentialism tied to a successful exit or not. We have to celebrate the founders at the center of that journey and realize that, hey, if you are successful and you exit, that is the very best outcome. But if you do not, you are not a failure, because if we cannot change that, who wants to go on that journey? Who wants to run that race if they know that regardless of how much they give, regardless of whether it's really their ability to derive success or failure, that they're going to be viewed ultimately as a failure? In our case, we serve a very critical need. We compete against companies that have 5 to 10x more funds than we do, and yet we have a hell of a business, right? And this difference between success and failure is a factor of time. And so I hope to sit on this stage a year from now and say, our success is we're still going, but I will sit on this stage whenever you would like me to, regardless, because I know that I gave everything and that we added to the continued success of the ecosystem as a whole.
Thank you.
I would say, as we are going through these journeys, whether you're an investor, a business person, what direction you're coming from, there's a lot of buzz phrases going around, focus on the journey. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. We get so wrapped up in the future excitement, the future fear, all these things that we're working towards, the goals. We totally miss what's happening around us. Seriously, don't let that happen. Try to enjoy that journey. Whatever it ends up being, who cares where it ends up? Really. Experience the day-to-day, the now experience that you have in front of you every morning when you get up. I think that's so important. And we get so wrapped up and distracted from that. So if anything, I'd just like to give everybody a reminder today, and myself, to pay attention and really appreciate that journey.
Well, I would simply say remain a committed member of this sister/brotherhood that we are in, and ask for help, support each other, continue to do the things like we're doing here today. And remember, I don't know all of you, but I'm pretty sure that if one of you asked another of you for help or advice, that the answer would be yes, because we share something so unique and so powerful. So say yes.
Yeah, absolutely. The importance of peer support. Thank you so much. Thank you for your vulnerability and for your stories. We so appreciate that.